Hello, welcome back to our weekly reflection. We have been reading Matthew's Gospel this year, and you may recall that last week I was saying that there's a strategic turn in the road from Galilee to Jerusalem, the journey of Jesus in his public life. And last week we noticed how Jesus draws back from the crowds. The Beatitudes on the Mount of Beatitudes is a classic example how Jesus spoke to a crowd. That's the way it's presented. You may also recall that I think that many of the Beatitudes have been collected from hilltops and valleys and streets and homes and put into that wonderful bit of Beatitude writing that we get in Matthew, but it's set on a mountain. It's the New Sinai, but there's crowds there. The feeding of the 5,000, it's a great tribe, and it's a dramatic setting again. Many people who sat down on the grass and were fed. That's the storyline. So it's to do with crowds. But last week we moved from a crowd setting to Jesus concentrating on a formative foundation group. We recognised that the 12 disciples were there, and I made the remark last week that in fact Luke picks up in his gospel that there was more than 12 who travelled with Jesus, devotees, people who were somewhat or substantially engaged in his presentation of life and meaning and values, men and women who helped out along the road, who got lunch, who settled them down for the night, who organised things. And I was saying there's a sort of a let-in for us there that we are also the mob, the tribe, the group who dare to travel with Jesus in our own time. So, in the reading we have in the churches this weekend is a continuation of that focus of Jesus talking, forming the foundation group. Letty is going to do the reading. Letty is the younger sister of Thomas, Tom, who was on with us last week. They're two of the two Parrota children. Letty goes to University High, and she's in Year 10. So to Letty for the reading of the Gospel.
According to Matthew, Jesus spoke to his disciples, "If your brother or sister sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the brother or sister listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the brother or sister refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such be a one to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if the two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them." The Gospel of the Lord.
If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. Harden not your
So again, we're back with Jesus focused in a fairly intense formation of the, if you want to call them an in-group or a vital group. They certainly were his followers, his devotees, who have moved from the crowd, and he's saying, look, things are getting tight. We need to sit down and attend to a number of matters. There are a number of things we must sort out. One of the big things that has to be sorted out in this segment of his teaching and of his life is that how do we deal with followers who don't agree with one another, where disputes occur. And when there's disputes, there can be hurt and alienation and all sorts of brokenness. So it's the issue of disputes that may occur in the faith community. Matthew works on two levels here. At one level is Galilee, heading up to Judea and Jerusalem, and that's to do with the disciples of Jesus that have to learn that there will be nailing times now in their lives. This is not a easy flow into the triumphant Messiah. This is about the suffering servant who will be broken for the things he deeply values, for his fidelity to his God. And the disciples have to learn that you will also have to take up the cross. You will have to give of your life in order to find it. That was the segment we had last week. So now we're dealing with, again, the community who are being formed. So when Jesus talks to his fellow Jewish people, he cites the book of Leviticus, because in the ancient Jewish text is a whole format around the issue of how do we resolve disputes. People of God, Jewish people, they had to do this thing. What Jesus is saying to the Jewish people who are there, who have come over to the way of the Nazarene, this is what we'll have to attend to. And the steps for resolving conflict in the faith community are precisely a mirror of the book of Leviticus. In Leviticus, it's done in ancient times with Jewish people. Now it's being done by Jesus, the faithful Jew, who takes them along a new way, a new life, as for them the Saviour. So, what Matthew's doing here when he says about talk quietly to the one you've had a dispute with, if that doesn't work, bring along someone else who can listen and work it through with you both. If that doesn't work, you take it to the wider community. Matthew uses the word ecclesia, or church. Remember, those words are written in Greek. So he uses the word church twice in his gospel, once when upon this rock I shall build my church, the story of the Peter encounter we had a little earlier, and he uses the word church here about then take it to the church, the assembly, the community. Now, there's things we've got to consider here. Again, it's meant for Jesus' own time there in Palestine. But it's also meant for when Matthew writes the gospel, for the people of his time, after Jesus has been crucified, we claim he has risen, he has commissioned them to go out, he has drawn back from them, which we look at in the story of the ascension of Jesus. He is in a way drawn back from them, and yet the Spirit of Pentecost has come to go with them, to guide them, to steady them, to reassure them. So in that line, which is separate from Jesus of Nazareth walking the tracks to Jerusalem, in the story written by Matthew, it's all about what happens in our time. By this stage, we presume that Peter has a presence in a number of faith communities as they moved up into Syria towards Antioch and places in between. Remember, in the meantime, Paul is also talking about forgiveness and how we come to terms with division, committed people having different views on things. So there are two worlds going on here as we read this story. Now, it's also important to pick up that wonderful line at the end of the Gospel this day, is that the presence of God will come down and will be with those who share the law, the Torah, who share the witness of the Gospels. And this, they called the Shekinah, the coming down of the presence of God, who will be with those who discuss the law in the Lord's name, the Lord God there. Remember a little bit in the Matthew's Gospel, that's really important. Same stuff, same Jewish stuff. Now, if you like, in a new context, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I shall be in the midst of them. It's that old Jewish concept that you won't have to do this alone. I will come down, my presence, my inspiration, my spirit will help you, enable you, and there will be a steady reassurance. That's a Jewish perception again, deeply embedded in their tradition, but it's brought out in Matthew, the Jew, who has become the Christian, the follower of the Christ, as a treasure that they take with them. It's part of that bridge building process between the old order and the new, and the steadying authority, and above all the service that they offer will make the Lord present. All this will be leading to the gospel we have next week about forgiveness. After you've had the row, after there's been the dispute, you've tried to resolve it by consulting, bringing someone else in it, trying to sort it through with a faith community. What happens next? And the next part of Matthew's Gospel is to do with forgiveness. And the big line is, how often do we have to forgive? 7 times? 77 times? That sort of stuff we'll do next week. But there's practicalities that we have to look at. First of all, Jesus has said already that to follow my way will not be easy, it'll be demanding and draining, and that what we're really called to be are servants for one another, rather than lording it over one another. That's a very big perspective in what Peter is trying to present to his followers, and as I say, to a number of communities. And they're the sort of things that we have to handle in our own time. Take, for instance, controversial areas now, like should the leader of the Eucharist, which we call priest, should that priest have a partner? Could the priest be a woman? Now you're going to get a long history of people saying no, they can't be, and no, the priest should not marry, although we've had something like 1100 years of marrying priests in the Roman Rite, and of course the Eastern Rite to this day has married priests. And then there are former Anglican ministers who have come over into the Roman tradition and have kept their wives and families. So you get this debate going on about can the one who presides over the Eucharist be married? Could they be women as well as men? Now, I often think of stubborn conviction as much as an insightful move forward. You can't write off the people who say, no, it is not a valuable thing for priests to marry. People on the other side say, well, why can't they have companionship of a partner? There's nothing wrong with the dignity of their sexual relationship. The other side says, no, they should be apart and should only enter into the most intimate relationship in life with their Lord and Master. They should remain celibate. So we have this feeling on one side and the other. Take the issue of women's ordination. I come out of a social science background where a lot of study is done of gender and of culture, and I would say to me it's a matter of the culture for so long was patriarchal, and just as we wouldn't have ever had women funeral directors even a couple of decades ago, now they're everywhere. We would never have had a governor of the state being a woman as we have now. We wouldn't have had a Supreme Court justice, let alone the Chief Justice being a woman. To me, it's a matter of how gender and culture changes with different expectations at different times. On the other hand, there are a significant number of people in the church who say, no, it just can't happen, it's a doctrine. I would say, well, where does the doctrine come from? It comes from a culture and a time, and it's more to do with that. Now, these are where good people on both sides of the fence can either end up clawing one another to death or having to be respectful of one another's view. And you get that situation in very practical terms occurring here from the Jesus interacting, trying to bring his followers to a sense of Leviticus, of go through the steps. And in the end you may not be able to resolve it, but be of service and be of peace and healing to one another. Just a mention that last weekend was Social Justice Sunday, and a parishioner today reminded me that it's appropriate to say something. This year, Social Justice Sunday is looking at the whole issue of mental health of people, and it looks at the realistic stigma that often surrounds people that have a mental health issue. It looks at just how neglect in this area has led to a lot of hurt and suffering. And so the bishops have put out a very helpful statement that you can look up, and I'll get Roger to put these words up on the screen at the end. You just have to Google, and if you're not into the IT, get someone who can do this for you. Just Google Catholic Bishops' Conference, and that will take you into one of the first things that pops up is the social justice statement with regard to care for those who have a mental health problem. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to moving into another aspect of debate, where we can either be vicious or be gentle with one another. This is part of Jesus' formation of the original 12 and devotees that travelled with them, because it's still very relevant in our own time. Bye for now.
Gather your people, O Lord. Gather your people, O Lord. One bread, one body, one spirit of life. Gather your people, O Lord. Wash us, Lord.